You said at the outset of the show that the number one driver of profit growth is people growth. And that's my overriding philosophy of this book and everything I do. And that sounds great, and people nod. And how many leaders say, well, people are our greatest asset? Well, I call BS on that. That's a nice thing to say, but when push comes to shove, it is coaching, development of your people. Is that truly your number one priority? And for most leaders, it's not.
Welcome to the Better Culture Podcast, where we make the clear connection between better culture and better business. This podcast is for leaders who want to build stronger teams, drive thriving companies, and enjoy your leadership role along the way. Now here's your host, Brett Hoogeveen, a leadership and culture aficionado, keynote speaker, and co-founder of Better Culture.
We all know that the number one driver of profit growth is people growth. But most leaders are still stuck using outdated performance reviews to get there. Today's guest is here to change that. Today's guest is Mike Goldman. Is someone who spent the last 30 years coaching leadership teams at companies you know, like Disney, Verizon, Chanel, IBM. He's a TEDx speaker, a best-selling author, and the host of the Better Leadership Team Show podcast. Mike is the expert CEOs call when they want to scale their business by scaling their people. His newest book, The Strength of Talent, introduces a bold new framework to help leaders grow high performers, retain the right talent, and finally fix what's broken about traditional performance management. Mike Goldman, thanks for being on the Better Culture Podcast.
Thanks, Brett. I'm looking forward to our discussion.
Absolutely. I am excited that you're here. Thanks for taking the time. Would you mind just taking us back a little bit, telling our audience just a little bit about who you are, your background, and sort of how you started as a leadership team coach and why you've made sort of this focus of your new book, your current life's work?
Yeah, I'll give you the quick version of the 35-year journey. Yes, I know I don't look that old, but
no, not even close.
Stop it. So started off right smack out of college, not even master's degree, PhD. No, right out of undergrad. Went to work as a management consultant back in 1987 for a company that's now known as Accenture, but they weren't even called Accenture back then. And spent the first half of my career, the better part of about 17 years in management consulting, working for a lot of Fortune 500 companies. And, decided from there, I was doing a whole bunch of travel, had two small kids at home. So I said, I'm going to start my first business. And I started a staffing and recruiting business.
Okay.
Which was, for me, just a miserable failure. 3 years of money flying out the window, 7 years of financial hell. No. Even after closing the business after 3 years, there was 4 more years of financial hell. Oh but at the tail end of the staffing business, to try to create a better staffing business, I said, wait a minute, I've been a consultant all my life. I'm better than this. Like, why don't I do workshops on employee retention and employee productivity? People will see me more strategically, and it'll help my staffing and recruiting business. It did zero for my staffing and recruiting business, but people really liked the workshops. Mm-hmm. And I loved doing them. I just felt like I was in my element. So when I finally kind of walked away, there was nothing much to sell. When I walked away from the staffing business, I said, I'm going to keep doing these workshops. I kind of like it. And I went from working with the big Fortune 500s to working more with small and mid-market, mostly mid-market companies, and didn't even know what I was calling myself yet. But that's how I kind of fell into the workshops, and that became coaching, and that became a real focus on working with leadership teams, which is where I am today.
Yeah. When you and I met a few years back, your focus and your show is really focused on leadership teams, high-performing leadership teams. What does that look like? Tell me just a little bit about that and why that work is so interesting and impactful.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many coaches out there, right? And forever, for a long time as a coach, I was saying, well, I help companies grow. I help leaders reach their potential. It's like me and 10,000 other coaches, not a real differentiator. And then, it really wasn't until, and for about the last, since about 2012, I was working exclusively with leadership teams. Before that, I was doing some leadership development work with basically anybody who could write a check. I would do leadership development work for them, but started working with leadership teams. And then, back right about 2018, 2019, it kind of hit me that what I do is create great leadership teams. Yes, I help companies grow. I help create great companies that are growing and create fulfilling environments and having impact. I do all those things. But what really differentiates me is my whole philosophy of, as the leadership team goes, so goes the rest of the company. And I really started focusing more, branding myself, writing books. The Strength of Talent is my second book, totally focused, on, at this leadership team level. But realize that what I do is help create great leadership teams. And that not only focused me, but it really started differentiating me from all the other coaches and consultants out there.
It does make you different because, there's a lot of, like you said, one-off coaches that do one-on-one work with people. And there are a lot of consultants that tackle lots of broad projects, but there are, a lot of others that really focus on leadership teams as a core focus. So I love that. And the work we do at Better Culture is focused on employee engagement, culture, anything that we can do to help organizations become better places to work. And if we don't have a leadership team that makes that a priority for their business, we're almost done talking. You got to have that alignment at the top. You got to have a commitment, a prioritization, a strategy, and a walking of the walk of anything you're trying to tackle in business that comes from the top. So I get it. That's really cool. So this conversation, what I thought would be interesting to talk about is some of the big things that you are focusing on in your newer book, which is hopefully will come out after this podcast launches, which is called The Strength of Talent. In that book and in your press kit, I saw that you said that only 2% of leaders think that their performance management system is valuable. Tell me about that. Why is that number? It doesn't.
Yeah, let's talk about that. I'm going to back up a minute.
Yeah.
Let's talk about why that number is so important and so scary, right? You said at the outset of the show that the number one driver of profit growth is people growth. And that's my overriding philosophy of this book and everything I do. And that sounds great, and people nod. And how many leaders say, well, people are our greatest asset? Well, I call BS on that. That's a nice thing to say. But when push comes to shove, is coaching, development of your people, is that truly your number one priority? And for most leaders, it's not. And when we think about growing our people, when we think about people development, we think about, annual performance reviews, which I think are the worst invention ever created in business. Annual performance reviews and 360s and performance improvement plans and joint goal setting and KPIs and all these things. Some of them are very good things done in the right way, but all those things kind of come together into this thing we call performance management. Well, Mercer Group did that study that you're referring to that said only 2% of leaders believe their performance management is adding great value. Well, if the number one driver of profit growth is people growth, and our people growth main set of tools, performance management, is only adding value 2% of the time, that's scary. We need to fix that. And I think the big reason for that is, as leaders, as I said, although leaders talk a good game, they don't really prioritize it. Everything else is more urgent than developing people. How we align around, measures of individual performance and team performance is broken. Most leaders have no idea of the difference between coaching, development, feedback, holding someone accountable. Those are all different things. Mm-hmm. But leaders don't understand that. They don't know how to coach people. There's no accountability for growing talent on your team. There's only accountability for hitting all the other KPIs.
I think you're absolutely right. That makes a ton of sense, Mike. And I can clearly see exactly what you're describing. And tell me if you agree with this, but I think in the long term, it's somewhat obvious or somewhat easy to measure probably whether or not people are growing, whether or not your organization, is better off 5 or 10 years in the future than it was 5 or 10 years ago. But in the short term, you tell me what manager's doing a good job growing their people, or what company is doing a good job in growing their people. And unless you're looking at specific development programming or things that they're doing, it's probably hard to know or hard to see. Does that make some sense? Is it somewhat invisible and you don't even see that you have a problem, that your people aren't growing and developing?
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. And that's one of the reasons I wrote the book, because it is invisible today. Say the number one driver of profit growth is people growth. Okay, we get that. We might agree with that. But there's this cliche that says you can't manage what you don't measure, right? And it's a cliche because it's usually true. Number one driver of profit growth is people growth. Do we measure profit growth? Of course we do. Any leader could tell us after looking at their phone for 10 seconds, can tell us how they're doing down to the 0.1% compared to last year, compared to plan. But if I say, how you doing with people growth? Pretty good.
Yeah, exactly.
Pretty good's not a measure. We need a measure. So part of what I've done in this book and using this framework I call the talent density system is there is a measure, not just long-term, but there's a measure I call the talent density indicator. That is a measure where quarterly you understand how you are trending for the company, for the senior leadership team, for the sales team, the marketing team, the finance team. You have a measure that says, how are we doing growing our people? Are we trending up? Are we trending down? We need that measure so we can hold ourselves and others accountable.
Yeah, this is really interesting, and I want you to explain in a minute help listeners understand more about what is this talent density framework. And I want to draw a corollary, or at least try, to the work that we do around culture. At a very basic level, if you don't have awareness that it's important, that's sort of number one, right? And I think that's what you're talking about, saying people growth will drive the success of your business, and that you need to elevate that consciousness. Number two is, do you have a baseline? Are you measuring it? Do you have sort of a tool set to measure it? And then number three, this is oversimplification, but are you doing something? Do you have resources, tools, something that's actually helping you make progress, right? And any important priority, it's a priority, you're measuring it, and you're regularly and consistently doing something about it to help make progress. Does that square with your view of this talent density framework?
Yeah, it does. And when we think of this whole system, this what I call the talent density system, there are two ways to look at it. And I'm going to do it very quickly. And then, Brett, you tell me where or if we want to drill in. But one way to think of this system is it's a process. And the process has 5 steps. The first step is we need to set expectations. We need to align around expectations. And that's expectations on performance. And performance is not just productivity. It's productivity and it's culture fit. I know that's music to your ears, yes, right? Indeed. So step 1 is we need to set expectations, productivity, culture fit. Step 2 is we need to assess performance against those expectations, not secretly passing files to HR or in annual performance reviews. The leadership team needs to get together and assess performance and debate that and challenge each other on those assessments. Set expectations, assess performance. The third step, the most important step, is taking action on that performance. The fourth step is driving accountability. How do we hold ourselves and others accountable for taking those actions and having the results we want? That's where this measure, the talent density indicator, comes in. And then the fifth step is cascading it down through the organization. And there's some very important change management pieces of that. So one way to look at the system is this 5 steps of expectations and assessment and action and accountability and cascade. The other kind of perspective to take on the system is it's a framework of 2 axes, productivity and culture fit, to assess performance. And there are very specific guidelines, so it's fact-based. So we know based on the assessment of those 2 components, who within our team is high performing, who's medium performing, who's low producing, and who's a low culture fit. And by the way, low culture fit means you're not living the company's core values.
Yeah.
I don't care how productive you are. You could be the number one revenue producing salesperson. If you're making the people around you worse and hurting the culture, you are toxic. So that framework, and it's, it's easy to describe with a picture, but that framework of those two components and how it drives these 4 levels of performance is the heart of making this a more fact-based model. And it's also the heart of turning this into a measure where you can measure this thing I keep calling the talent density indicator, the TDI, which is the percent of folks that are high performing minus the percent of folks that are low performing. And
So
there's two, yeah.
Does each individual in an organization or a team, do they each get a score, or how do you know percentage high performing, percentage low performing? Then you don't have to go into great detail, but in general, is it a bunch of factors, or does it boil down to one factor, or how do you get a sense of where where each individual is sort of at?
Yeah. So let's start with the senior leadership team doing it for their direct reports. And eventually it cascades down throughout, but let's just keep it to that level. So there is something I call the QTAM, the quarterly talent assessment meeting, where those leaders get together. And part of the purpose of that meeting is they assess the performance of each of their direct reports, and they assess productivity, and they have KPIs. What are the 2 or 3 or 4 measures of success that drive productivity? They score culture fit. Culture fit ideally is we have these 4 core values.
Yes. For
For each of those core values, are they modeling it? Are they living it? Are they occasionally having problems? Are they frequently having problems? And there is within the method a way to score each person based on that. And the score of productivity results in a number between 0 and 10. The score of culture fit results in a number between 0 and 10. And based on that number, they fall in a different category of performance. And the reason I do this in a meeting versus everybody put it in a spreadsheet and send it to HR is because part of the team can call bullshit and say, what do you mean Brett is a 9 in culture fit? I saw him cursing out the customer service team again on Tuesday.
Yeah.
Don't we have a core value that's we treat everyone like grandma?
Yes.
Like, what's going on? So it becomes this idea of doing it in a meeting. It becomes a truth serum.
Yeah.
And it makes it way more fact-based.
So, Mike, and we didn't plan this, so I apologize for the left field question here. But how does this relate to a 9-box type of a model? Are you familiar?
Ooh, I
with
love that question.
Concept? Is that a concept that's familiar with you?
Yeah, I love that question. Throw left field, right field, throw anything.
Okay,
at me.
good. I figured you were game for it.
So I may piss some people off here.
That'd be just fine. Go for
Maybe
it.
even the host of the show, if you're a big 9-box fan.
No, I'm not.
But I am not a big 9-box fan. And for those that don't know what 9-box is, it's basically, whereas my 2 axes are productivity, which is about results. It's not about how long and hard someone's working. My 2 axes are productivity and culture fit. The 9-box, which has 9 categories of performance versus my 4, the 9-box is performance. I don't know how they define it, but it's performance. And then the other is potential. There's nothing on there in my mind that says culture. It's performance, and normally performance taken in and of itself is more synonymous with productivity is the way people think about it. So one problem I have with 9-box is culture is not made a big piece of this. And I actually think culture fit is more important than productivity, because if someone's living your culture, productivity is coachable. If someone's not living your culture, if they're not living your core values, I think 9 out of 10 times that's not coachable. And it's not because they're a bad person. It's because trying to coach someone to live your core values that's not already living your core values is like trying to coach them on something to become someone they're not. So the one problem I have with the 9-box is culture is not called out in any significant way. The other thing is I think they put too much weight on potential.
Yeah. Well,
I think everybody has potential.
Right. It's probably hard to assess potential as well, right?
Yeah, it's hard to assess, and I think, and hey, I have discussions with my clients about potential, but I think having potential is one of the two components. I think people tend to use potential as an excuse for why someone's not performing yet.
Sure.
And
that's a
so,
good point.
so I think they put too much weight on potential, almost no weight on culture. I think 9 boxes is just too many damn boxes, and it gets confusing.
You got
so,
more, they
so
got
I'm
9.
not a big
I
fan.
like it. Okay, helpful. Thank you for. I'm glad I threw out the question. Where do you want to go? What's a good follow-up question? I'm a really good host here, Mike. Tell me, does it make sense? You said that taking action is a really important step out of those 5. Any of the 5 steps? So I got setting expectations, right? Assessing performance, taking action, driving accountability, and then cascading it. I love the structure of this. I like the fact you're talking to the right audience, right? That you've got productivity and culture fit, because we're huge advocates for the value of culture fit. And so are most organizations. They just don't regularly measure it and talk about it and include it in a performance management process. For me, when I heard this initially, the visual that I got, and you tell me if this is right or wrong, but the idea of thinking about a company, you're probably going to cringe here, all right? And saying, look, you've got a certain number of employees, and I'm kind of a math and science guy. So this idea of density is interesting to me, right? Talent density. You got a certain number of employees. That's sort of like your volume of space. And then there's a certain amount of talent inside of your organization. And that's sort of how, if you had molecules floating around, or if you had people, whatever's inside that space, how much talent is packed in there. And if you had some measure to say, 2 years ago, we had, 70 units of talent. Now we have 72 units, 74, 76. Like, we're actually growing our people. We're actually, the density of talent, the level of talent inside of this organization is progressing, right? And that to me feels like an incredibly important concept to be able to benchmark and to keep track of. Am I close? Did I
No, you got
right
it.
field this time?
No, you came right down center field, pictures
Yes.
mound,
All
right
right,
over the
good.
plate. Yeah, I mean, it's super important, and the way the number is calculated, you wind up with a TDI, a talent density indicator, somewhere between negative 100%.
Okay.
If your whole team is low performing folks, either low producing or low culture fit, to positive 100%, which is everybody's high performance. Now, when I work with leadership teams, very often when the first time I do this with them, they have a number like negative 32.
Oh, okay.
And it scares the crap out of them.
Okay.
As it should.
Mm-hmm.
But the point is, it's a benchmark. It's a benchmark. The idea is that's where you are now. You're no worse than you were 10 minutes ago before knowing the number. That's where you are now. What are you going to do to raise that number over the next 90 days? And one of the big mistakes I see leaders make, and I say this not to point the finger, because I made the same mistake for many years, is when we think about the actions we need to take to improve the talent density indicator and improve our results and improve our culture and all the things we want to do to create a great company. Most leaders overinvest in their low performers and underinvest in their high performers.
Yes,
And what we wind up doing is spending all this time with folks that are low in productivity and or low in culture fit. And by the way, they're human beings. We should be spending time with them. But when we spend the bulk of our time with those folks, what we're doing is we are desperately trying to drag a whole bunch of people up to average. At the same time, we're ignoring our best people. And by the way, if one of your best people improves their productivity by 10%, that's a whole lot more value than one of your lowest performers improving by 10%. Like, just do the math. But what happens is, as we're trying to drag a bunch of people up to average, and we are ignoring our top performing folks and not challenging them to grow and not coaching them, saying, oh, Brett's an A player, like I don't have to worry about him. What happens is those high performing folks, two things happen. They either start to get stale because they're not being challenged to grow, or if we assume high-performing folks want to grow, if they're not growing with you they're going to leave and go grow somewhere else. So what winds up happening is we have better low performers, worse high performers, and we meet somewhere in this middle at this thing I like to call polished mediocrity.
Oh, okay.
Which is a recipe for death in your organization.
Sure. So, okay, I agree with everything you said.
You better.
Yeah, I think you're nailing that on the head, and I think it's a business imperative that organizations think about the talent that they have and how they can make it healthier, stronger, progress it. If you could boil it down, I don't want to make this too much of a math question because it's a people question, right? But if a company wants to make progress on their talent density, what will move the needle the farthest, the fastest in general? Now, I know that there's high-performing cultures and then there's low-performing cultures, and the answers might be a little different from one to the other. But is it, let me guess, would you say it is removing and replacing low performers, bad culture fits? Does that move the needle the farthest, the fastest? Or is it investing in and growing your higher performers, or is it something else?
Well, I'm going to take a combination of what you said, but then I'm going to throw something maybe a smaller step out there that may be helpful for folks. But I actually think the better investment is to invest in your highest performers. However, I'm going to cheat a little bit, because one of the things you want to do for your highest performers, and I've got, in the book and in my coaching, there's a list of about 16 things you should be doing with and for your high performing folks. One of those things is to remove barriers. If there's barriers in their way from rocket ship to the moon, if you're micromanaging them, that's a barrier. Well,
Yes.
What's the biggest barrier in the way of your high performing folks? Too many low performing folks running around. Right? So I think the answer is your best return on investment is you've got to take care of your best people.
Mm-hmm.
That's really it. Now, if we want to get smaller than that, like taking care of your best people, that's a lot of things. Yes. But as a leader listening to this, saying, all right, well, what's something I can just go do? Like, what's something I can do right now? Is number one, and I'll give you two things. Number one is set crystal clear expectations with each of your direct reports. Sounds crazy simple. 95% of leaders I work with, I was just with a group of CEOs yesterday in a workshop, 15 CEOs. And I said, I want you to list out for each of your direct reports, what are the 2, 3, or 4 measures of productivity that define success for each of your direct reports. He struggled over that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, I said, number one, most importantly, if you are struggling to come up with what those measures of success are, what that tells me is your direct reports have no idea what success looks like. If you're struggling with it, how do they know what it is?
Right.
You haven't aligned. So number one is for productivity and culture fit. You need to be crystal clear with your direct reports what you are expecting. And that doesn't mean go and dictate a bunch of KPIs to them. It should be very collaborative because they need to own it. But number one, you need to be crystal clear on priorities. And I'd say number two is, I think one of the most important things we could do as leaders that most leaders don't do or screw up, and this, by the way, will replace the dreaded, horrible annual performance review, is you need to have productive, structured, weekly one-on-one meetings with each of your direct reports. And if you say, I'm so busy, I don't have time to meet with every one of my direct reports, for 30 minutes every week, well, then you should have no one reporting to you.
Really? Yeah.
Because it is critical. And I have a very specific framework I use with my clients where there's 2 different types of one-on-ones and you alternate. One type of one-on-one is the feedback and accountability meeting, whereas the leader, that's your agenda about feedback and accountability. And then the second type of meeting, alternate weeks, is called the coaching meeting. That agenda is owned by whoever your direct report is, who comes in and says, here's where I need help. And your job as a leader is to ask them questions and model a way of thinking to help them come up with the right action for them, not to give them advice or give them the answer.
Well, Mike, you've shared a lot of good advice on this call, but that is such a practical concept that I want to make sure that people hear. Often, way too often, managers conflate talking about performance in a one-on-one. They conflate those two topics. One is, how are those projects going? Can I give you some feedback? Can I give you some coaching? Et cetera? And the other one is, how are you doing? What's going on in your world? What are you interested in? What do you want to grow in? How, what can I do to support you, et cetera? And those are two very different conversations, and trying to do them all in one meeting without breaking them apart and saying, no, this is this meeting, and then next week we're going to have a different agenda. I think that's really helpful advice. I love that.
You also get an idea of how coachable your direct report is. If they're coming in every other week for their coaching meeting and saying, I don't know what I want to talk about, what do you want to talk about? You've got a problem. Either they're afraid to tell you what they're struggling with, so you've got a problem with having a trusting relationship, or they're not smart enough to know what they're struggling with, and then you got a big problem, or you're not challenging them enough so they're not struggling, so you should be challenging them a little bit more. Mm-hmm. Or they're not coachable, so they don't want to tell you what they're, either way, you've got a problem. So it's a really powerful thing to do.
Interesting. That is so interesting. Is there anything that we haven't covered that pops to mind that you think is really important for people to understand about what it really means to increase their talent density in their organization, replace that outdated performance management model with a more modern approach that you could help them with? Anything we haven't covered? That's
interesting? I'm glad you asked, Brett, because there is one thing that's super important. And it's how we label folks, the categories we use. I said there's 4 categories of performance that I use. I call it high performing, medium performing, low producing, and low culture fit.
Okay.
Now, back in 2020, I wrote a book called Breakthrough Leadership Team. In that book, I have an older version of this model. I used to call folks A player, B player, C player, toxic C player.
Okay.
That's a lot more memorable. It's a lot catchier. Here was the problem I found. Is when you call someone, and I'm going to say B player. When you call someone a B player, that doesn't sound like you're evaluating how they're performing. It sounds like you're judging who they are. And I had leadership teams saying things like, well, B players, they just want to leave at 5 o'clock and they just want to do enough not to get fired and they're not going to do any more. It's as if, 35 years ago, the doctor came out and said, oh, Brett, I'm sorry. Your wife has given birth to an 8-pound, 2-ounce B player. I'm terribly sorry. And my point in saying that, the reason why I changed it to medium performing, which means that's how they're performing right now, that's not who they are, is the idea of when we say medium performing or low producing or high performing, it's not only does that say that's how they're performing now, but it means as a leader, you need to take responsibility. Someone might be medium performing, not because you hired wrong. Now, when you think B player, you think, oh, I just hired a B player. No, they might be medium performing because you're not doing a great job leading them. You're not doing your one-on-ones that you should have. You haven't inspired them with a vision. You're not coaching and developing them enough. You're not providing them with the right tools. When you say medium performing, so it's really easy, and it's not necessarily wrong to say, well, all of my team members, they're responsible for managing their own careers and developing themselves. Yeah, that's okay. But you are also responsible as a leader to grow talent, to grow strength of talent within your organization. And if someone's performing at a medium level, it's up to you to figure out a way to get them performing at a higher level. We need to take responsibility for that as leaders.
So I'm going to go out on a limb as we kind of move to wrap this, Mike, that I think if I were to implement this system, one of the most important goals is to move away from probably the initial score is really not what you want people focusing on. You don't want people focusing on labels, on, they're this type of an employee, they're this type of even if it's temporary, even if it's just right now, that's how their performance is. What ultimately benefits the organization isn't the initial benchmark. It's how much progress are you making. Is that accurate?
It's
right?
Accurate. And I coach my leaders to not go back and tell people, oh, by the way, we just did this thing. You're high performing. You're medium performing.
Exactly.
You may want to pick a different industry. Like, no, the point is, and that's one of the problems with annual and quarterly performance reviews. We give people an exceeds or a meets, and all people want to do is push back on the rating. Don't tell people their rating. Help people with what they need to improve on. Coach them. Don't tell them what the category is.
In the short term, it feels good to say, oh, this person is, they're at this level, they're an 8, they're a 7, they're a whatever. But ultimately, that will have less to do with your long-term success, how a snapshot in time, than is everyone cumulatively making progress, right? Are we growing our people? Is the density increasing, right? And so I think, to me, that would be the mark of a really strong leader or a strong leadership team is, okay, we're a negative 33. Great. What's the plan to improve this steadily and consistently such that 3 years or 5 years in the future, we're at a 50 or we're, whatever the metrics are, right? It's not the initial score that really matters. It's what are you going to do to get better?
In fact, I'll take it even further. If I've got one leader who's got a TDI, a talent density indicator on his team of 60%, which is really good, high number, and it stays at 60%, versus someone else who started out at negative 50 and went to negative 20 and went to 0 and went to 20 and now they're at 30. To your point, that leader that is growing that TDI,
that's the more effective.
That's
leader.
the more effective. Because by the way, the guy or gal that's at 60 and has stayed at 60, what that tells me is he might have some good people and he's got a bunch of high performing folks on his team, but he's not continuing to challenge them. Because when you have a high TDI, sometimes the right thing to do is that may go lower for some period of time because you're raising the bar and challenging your best people. Absolutely. I would rather see a trend in the right direction than something that's just static.
Mike, I think this is a really interesting topic. Thank you for coming on and sharing it with us. If people want to learn more about you, about the services you provide, about your upcoming book, where can they go to get more of Mike Goldman? What do we do?
So depending on when you're listening to this, if you are listening before October 14th, 2025, which is the launch date of the book, then where you need to go, and the only place you want to go all day and night, is strengthoftalent.com. That's where you could pre-order the book. You get over $400 in goodies and bonuses, all cool stuff.
If they pre-order, they get extra stuff.
They get extra stuff. They get all these cool toys and tools. Now, if you are listening from the future and it's after the book launches, then you could still go there. You could still go to strengthoftalent.com. It'll have some cool stuff and you'll still be able to order the book there. But then you can go to mike-goldman.com, and that's where all things me are there. My coaching and my keynoting and my workshops and my books and a whole bunch of cool stuff going on.
Fantastic. Well, I will really encourage everyone to take a look at that, The Strength of Talent. I love the concept. The book is called The Strength of Talent. Go check it out. Follow Mike. He's got all kinds of great topics. Every time I interact with Mike, I think, now this is a guy that not only is passionate about what he does, but he actually knows what he's talking about. So, Mike, thank you for sharing with our audience your perspectives on how they can improve the talent in their organization.
Thank you, Brett. This is fun.
Want to take the next step to building a stronger culture? We're offering a free 15-minute Better Culture strategy call directly with me. We'll take the time to help you identify real opportunities to make your workplace better. No sales pitch, just real advice to help you lead better. Grab your time right now at betterculture.com/free call. Let's make something even better together.